All right, get ready because today we're going deep into Jim Case's Be Fearless.
Oh, yeah, a book full of wisdom on doing extraordinary things, right?
Exactly. And living a life full of purpose, which I know you're all about.
It is a great read.
We'll be looking at stories from Jane Goodall's research to the rise of Airbnb and even how those beautiful cherry blossoms ended up in Washington, D.C.
What I find fascinating about Case's book is, well, it's how she connects these seemingly totally different fields.
Yeah.
Like, she shows that those Be Fearless principles can apply whether you're an entrepreneur or a community leader or even student.
You're right. It's a pretty diverse range of examples.
Definitely.
So let's get into these 5 core principles. Make a big bet, be bold, take risks, make failure matter, and reach beyond your bubble.
Yeah,
They really do feel like a roadmap to a life that's more impactful, I think.
absolutely. What Case argues is that these principles, they're relevant to you no matter what your background is or where you are in life right now. It's all about, I think, really tapping into your potential and making a difference.
And I think what really struck me were the stories about everyday people who achieve these extraordinary things.
Absolutely.
Take Rachel Sumek, for example. She really tackled food insecurity on college campuses, which I think is amazing.
Yeah?
It really proves that you can make a difference starting right where you are.
A prime example of the make a big bet principle.
Right.
She started Swipe Out Hunger as a college student.
Really?
Yeah. Initially just collecting, extra food, leftovers.
Okay.
But then she saw a bigger opportunity. All those unused meal plan credits students often just lose at the end of the semester.
Oh, so instead of letting those credits just vanish, she found a way to use them to feed other students who are struggling with hunger.
Yeah.
That's so smart.
But she actually faced some pushback.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You won't believe it, but a dining hall manager literally destroyed her food collection boxes.
Wow, I can't even imagine.
Oh.
But, she persevered,
Right.
and the program got national recognition, and she was even recognized as a champion of change by President Obama.
That's right. Swipe Out Hunger has actually provided over 1.3 million meals to students and even inspired legislation for hunger-free campuses in California.
Really? Wow. Talk about a big bet that actually led to some amazing results.
It really highlights the power of just taking action even when you face obstacles, doesn't it?
It really does. Now, for a true trailblazer, let's talk about Madam C.J. Walker. She built a hair care empire. And not just that, she was empowering Black women economically.
That's right.
All in the early 1900s. It's pretty incredible.
Incredible story. Her story really embodies make a big bet, but on just a grander scale. She started with a personal challenge, hair loss, and just transformed it into this massive success. It's like a true testament to turning adversity into an opportunity for positive change.
Absolutely. And she didn't just fill a need, but she actually created a movement and really empowered a lot of women along the way. That's leaving a legacy. Now, speaking of shaking things up, we have to talk about Airbnb, which is, it's a household name at this point.
Oh, yeah.
But it started with 2 guys, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, and they were renting air mattresses just on their floor.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
That's incredible.
Their journey is a perfect example of be bold, take risks, but also make failure matter. Because
Yeah.
they faced constant skepticism. Investors just couldn't fathom why anyone would pay to sleep on a stranger's floor.
It is true. It is true.
But then you think about their marketing stunt, remember, with the Obama O's and the Cat McCain cereal?
Oh, yeah.
Pure ingenuity.
Really captures their scrappy, outside-the-box thinking. And that cereal stunt actually helped them get funding
Really?
from Y Combinator, which is a really big startup accelerator.
Oh, wow. And now look at them. They completely revolutionized the hospitality industry and proved that unconventional ideas can lead to groundbreaking success.
It does underscore the importance of challenging the norms and being willing to, I think, experiment, even if it means stumbling along the way.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, next up, we have Shazi Visram and Happy Family,
Oh, yeah.
which is a company focused on healthy baby food. I imagine that's a tough market to break into.
You would think, but Shazi identified a gap, and she went for it. And her story is a beautiful illustration of be better together, I think. She faced all these hurdles pitching a mom-friendly product in a very male-dominated investor world.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how many brilliant ideas are actually overlooked just because the people behind them don't fit that traditional mold.
It's a crucial point, yeah.
But she eventually did find investors who believed in her vision
She did.
and created a thriving company that really values both profit and purpose.
Absolutely.
Her babies before profits philosophy is so inspiring. It proves that you can build a successful business without compromising your values.
Yeah, and I think what's fascinating is that her mission, it kind of evolved after her son was diagnosed with autism. And this personal experience really fueled Happy Family's dedication to the well-being of the whole family.
Yeah, that blend of personal passion with a broader purpose is really what drives lasting change. So are you ready to get a little uncomfortable?
Oh, always.
Gene Case says it's essential for growth.
Let's talk about get uncomfortable, right? And embrace risk as R&D.
Okay. I mean, we're talking about Gene Case literally climbing a 30-foot telephone pole during an outward bound exercise.
Wow.
Talk about confronting your fears head on.
That's a powerful metaphor for, I think, stepping outside our comfort zones and trying things that we might not be naturally good at, right?
Right.
That experience actually made her question her own tendency to stick to what she knew she'd excel at.
Yeah, it's easy to stay in that safe zone, avoid things that make you feel a little uncertain or even a little scared.
Of course.
But real growth often happens when you push past those, self-imposed boundaries. So Case's story reminds us that sometimes we need to embrace those things that we're not good at to actually uncover new strengths and possibilities.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like the saying goes, get comfortable being uncomfortable. But what about risk?
Oh, yeah.
How do you even know if you're taking the right risks?
That's where embrace risk as R&D comes in.
Okay.
Think of risk like research and development in the business world. So you experiment, gather data, learn, and then adjust.
Okay, so it's not about blind leaps of faith, right? It's about calculated exploration.
Exactly. And there are some really incredible stories in the book that illustrate this. For example, let's start with Sir Ernest Shackleton and his, harrowing Antarctic expedition. Now, that's a story about overcoming difficulties.
Wait, the guy whose ship got crushed by ice?
The very same. His leadership during that expedition is legendary. I mean, he and his crew, they survived for months, trapped in the ice. And when their ship finally was crushed, they embarked on this incredible journey, hundreds of miles across treacherous ocean in these tiny lifeboats.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah. And his story really shows that even when you're facing these seemingly impossible obstacles, you can actually find a way forward, right?
Yeah.
If you stay calm and focused and adaptable. And his perspective on difficulty is striking. Difficulties are just things to overcome, after all.
Wow, what a mindset shift. Now, from icy adventures to space exploration, the book also talks about the launch of the first space shuttle, Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
And you were actually there.
I was.
Yeah.
To witness it.
Imagine the ground shaking as that shuttle launched into space, carrying the hopes and dreams of a nation.
It must have been incredible. Oh, it was a moment I'll never forget. The sheer bravery of those astronauts, risking their lives to push the boundaries of what's possible. I mean, it was inspiring. It really made me think, if they can do that, what can I do?
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the question that Case wants us to ask ourselves. What risks are we actually willing to take to achieve our own moonshots, whatever they may be?
Absolutely. But sometimes getting uncomfortable, it's not about a physical challenge or a life or death situation, right? Sometimes it's about confronting those internal doubts and questioning our assumptions.
Yeah.
This brings us to another really groundbreaking figure, Jane Goodall.
Oh, of course. Her story exemplifies the power of embracing risk as R&D. Right?
Yeah.
So she went to Africa to study chimpanzees, but with no formal training, which was unheard of at the time.
Wait, so she just ventured into the wild with these chimps?
She did.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And her approach was radically different from the traditional scientific methods. She didn't just observe from afar. She immersed herself in their world.
And she made observations that no one else had. She gave the chimps names, studied their individual personalities, even observed them using tools.
Yeah.
I mean, her work revolutionized how we understand primates, what it means to be human.
It was a huge risk to challenge that scientific establishment. But because she was willing to experiment, right, to get uncomfortable, trust her instincts, she made those groundbreaking discoveries that really did change the world.
That's a good lesson for us all.
Yeah.
Sometimes those unconventional approaches lead to the most significant breakthroughs. Okay, ready to head back to the lab?
Always. Let's explore how this embrace risk as R&D plays out in the world of science and, medical innovation.
We're talking labs, experiments, breakthroughs, the exciting stuff.
Exactly. And there's this fascinating parallel between scientific R&D and how we approach risk in our own lives,
Right.
right? Just as scientists test their hypotheses, they experiment to find solutions, we need to be willing to try new things, even if it means, failing along the way.
So failure is just part of the process, right?
Think of it as valuable data.
Okay.
It tells us what doesn't work and brings us closer to what does.
That's a good way to reframe it.
Yeah.
But let's get specific. The book talks about Dr. Edward Jenner and his work on the smallpox vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
That was a huge risk, right?
Yeah, back in the late 1700s, smallpox was a devastating disease. Jenner's idea to use a less potent virus, cowpox, to create immunity, that was considered very radical at the time.
I can only imagine the pushback.
Oh, I'm sure. But he believed in his research and was willing to even put himself at risk to test it.
Wow.
And ultimately, his work led to the eradication of smallpox, saving millions of lives.
Wow, that's quite a legacy. But what about risk in the modern era? Like, hasn't technology changed things?
Oh, absolutely. It's now possible to test and validate ideas much faster and with fewer resources.
So we can experiment without, like, risking everything.
Yeah. Exactly. And there are countless examples of companies that have used this approach to achieve massive success.
Yeah.
Right? The book talks about Zappos, the online shoe retailer.
Mhm.
The founder, Nick Swinburne, he had this idea to sell shoes online,
Okay.
but everybody told him it was crazy.
Yeah,
People need to try on shoes before they buy them. Right.
that makes sense. So how did he overcome that?
He started small. He went to shoe stores, took pictures of their shoes, built a simple website where people could order them. If someone placed an order, he would buy the shoes from the store and ship them himself.
That's resourceful.
Yeah. And that early experimentation allowed him to gather this crucial data about customer demand and the logistics of online shoe sales, and it really paved the way for their incredible success.
Like a real-life science experiment, but on a business scale.
Yeah. So from labs and vaccines to shoe websites, the key takeaway here is that we need to shift our mindset from fearing risk to seeing it as this essential part of learning and growth.
Absolutely. It's about embracing that experimental mindset, trying new things and learning from both successes and failures.
Exactly. And sometimes, the most significant breakthroughs come from building upon the work of others.
Yeah.
So let's dive into pick up where others left off.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating how many groundbreaking ideas didn't start from scratch.
Right.
They actually evolved from existing concepts, right?
That's really fascinating.
The book really debunks that myth of the aha moment, that flash of brilliance that leads to these world-changing inventions.
Yeah, it's usually much more nuanced than that, right?
Right.
The aha moment might be the spark, but it's the hard work, the iteration, and the building upon what's come before that really drives innovation.
Okay.
And the book uses Thomas Edison as an example.
Okay, Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, right?
Yes. But he wasn't the first person to conceive of an incandescent bulb.
Really?
No. Dozens of people had worked on similar concepts before him.
Wow, so what made Edison different then?
He was a master at taking existing ideas and refining them, right? Combining them with new insights and technologies to create something truly revolutionary. He was like a fast and effective follower, constantly learning and adapting.
So it's not about being the first, it's about being the best at building on what's already out there.
Yeah, precisely. And this principle, it applies not just to inventions, but to social movements and entrepreneurial ventures as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the book talks about the micro-lending movement pioneered by Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus. Now that's a powerful example of how a seemingly small idea can have a massive global impact.
Okay.
Yeah. And Yunus's work, it actually inspired Jessica Jackley,
Okay.
who co-founded Kiva,
Okay.
an online platform that connects lenders with entrepreneurs in developing countries.
So you mean people can actually loan money to small business owners in places like Africa through this website?
You can.
That's incredible.
And it's incredibly effective. Kiva has facilitated over $1 billion in loans with a repayment rate of 97%.
Oh.
So think about the ripple effect of that. Small loans are helping people start businesses, create jobs, lift themselves out of poverty.
That's a beautiful example of how those seemingly small actions can collectively create this huge change.
Absolutely.
And it all started with someone picking up where someone else left off. But, innovation isn't just happening in Silicon Valley or on a global scale.
Yeah.
The book actually highlights some really compelling examples of people making a difference in, the most unexpected places.
It does. Let's talk about Justin Knopf,
Oh, okay.
a fifth-generation farmer in Kansas who is really championing a very radical approach to agriculture.
Oh, okay.
No-till farming.
No-till farming. What's revolutionary about that?
It's all about soil preservation, right?
Mm-mm.
Traditional farming practices, with all the plowing and tilling, it can deplete the soil of these vital nutrients and release harmful carbon into the atmosphere. No-till farming really minimizes soil disturbance, so it helps protect the environment, but it also increases crop yields.
So it's a win-win for the farmer and the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Knopf's story is a great example of someone taking this existing concept and adapting it to create a more sustainable and productive approach, right?
Mhm.
He was inspired by a farmer in Nebraska who was using these no-till techniques.
Okay.
And he just brought that knowledge back to his own farm in Kansas. And he's not keeping it to himself. He's actually sharing his knowledge with other farmers, advocating for policy changes, and really helping spread this movement for more sustainable agriculture.
It's amazing how one person can create such a ripple effect. And it just goes to show that we can all learn from each other, build upon each other's successes, and really just push the boundaries of what's possible.
Absolutely.
But sometimes picking up where others left off can feel, daunting, especially when you're facing what seem like, insurmountable challenges. It's
Yeah.
like you're staring down this big, scary risk and feeling like there's just no way you can succeed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about fear.
Oh, yes. Fear, the big one. Let's explore risk or regret, a key part of, being fearless.
But wait, isn't avoiding regret all about, playing it safe?
Right.
That kind of clashes with this whole idea of taking risks, right?
Well, that's where things get interesting, I think. Case argues that playing it safe can actually be the riskiest move of all.
Really? So you mean inaction can actually lead to bigger regrets than action?
That's the idea.
That's a pretty interesting concept.
It is. And the book actually highlights this with a study published in Psychology Today about the importance of risky play for children.
Risky play? Like what? Climbing trees and exploring and stuff?
Exactly. Things like that. And the study found that kids who engage in that kind of play, they're actually less likely to get injured in the long run. They develop, better risk assessment skills, physical coordination, and confidence.
Makes sense. If you never push your limits as a kid, you might be more likely to make mistakes later as an adult.
Right, exactly. So how does this apply to, say, like business decisions or major life choices?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Think of it this way. If you constantly avoid risk, you're also avoiding the potential for growth and innovation, right?
Okay, I see.
The book actually quotes Josh Linkner's The Road to Reinvention, and he says, it turns out that playing it safe has become recklessly dangerous.
Wow, that makes you think twice.
It does.
Yeah.
So we got to be more willing to embrace calculated risks, even if it means there's a chance we might fail.
Okay. So Case's argument is that the regret of not doing something, that can be even worse than actually failing.
That's exactly it. And she illustrates this with a cautionary tale.
Oh,
The story of Kodak.
Kodak, the photography giant. What happened to them?
Well, they were synonymous with photography for over a century,
Right.
but they just failed to adapt to the digital revolution.
Oh, wow.
They were so focused on protecting their film business that they
Right.
totally missed the boat on digital.
Yeah, classic example of clinging to the past. Like they were so afraid of disrupting their own success that they got disrupted by the market.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's a reminder that we need to keep evolving, keep learning, keep adapting just to stay ahead,
It's true.
And it shows how important it is to be willing to pivot,
Yeah.
even if it means leaving behind something that was once, really successful.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
It is. Speaking of pivoting, though, the book also talks about Netflix.
Oh, yeah, Netflix. They started as a DVD by mail service,
Right.
and now look at them.
Global streaming giant.
That's a pretty impressive transformation.
It's a brilliant example of risk or regret in action, right? They could have stuck with their DVD business and probably done okay for a while,
Right.
but they saw where things were headed and made this bold move.
And it paid off.
Oh, yeah. They completely disrupted the entertainment industry. Makes you wonder, how many other companies could have avoided failing if they had just been a little more willing to adapt?
It's true. Case argues that we need to develop what she calls a pivot or perish mindset, like constantly scan the horizon, anticipate change, and be ready to, shift gears. Exactly.
Okay, but sometimes pivoting isn't enough, right?
Right.
What about those times when we hit a wall and we actually fail? How do we turn that into something good?
Well, that's where make failure matter comes into play.
Okay.
It's all about learning from our mistakes, use them as stepping stones to future success.
So not avoiding failure, but seeing it as part of learning.
Right. The book actually has some great strategies for doing that.
Oh, okay.
The first one is crash and learn.
Crash and learn. That sounds a little intense.
Well, it's about embracing experimentation,
Mm.
recognizing that failure is often, the quickest way to learn.
Mm-hmm.
The book highlights the work of Astroteller. He leads Google X, that's the company's moonshot factory.
Yeah.
And his team, they're actually encouraged to tackle the hardest parts of a problem first
Wow.
and to celebrate when they kill a project.
To celebrate failure.
It's part of their culture. They understand that by failing quickly and often, they weed out the bad ideas.
And that lets them focus their energy on the ones with real potential. And this approach has led to some incredible breakthroughs like self-driving cars and Google Glass.
So instead of seeing failure as a setback, they see it as a step toward success.
Right. They're moving from a fear-based culture to one that, embraces learning and experimentation. And it's not just Google X, by the way.
Oh.
The book also talks about IBM. They were almost bankrupt in the early 90s.
Right.
But they brought in this new CEO, Lou Gerstner, and he, totally shook things up.
Yeah.
Embraced this culture of experimentation and learning.
So he turned the company around.
He did. And he wrote a book about it called Who Says Elephants Can't Dance? It's a classic turnaround story,
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it really shows how important it is to be willing to change course, even if it's uncomfortable.
Okay, but not everyone is running a Google Lab or a Fortune 500 company.
Of course not.
How do we apply these make failure matter principles to our own lives,
Well, Kay says it starts with changing how we think about failure. She uses this great quote from Ed Catmull, the co-founder of Pixar. He says, "Mistakes aren't a necessary evil. They aren't evil at all. They are an inevitable consequence of doing something new."
So don't dwell on mistakes. See them as learning moments.
Exactly. And sometimes those lessons come from the most surprising places. The book tells a story about Kelly Clark. She's a 5-time Olympic snowboarder,
Wow, that's impressive.
right? She's known for being incredibly resilient, like bouncing back from injuries and setbacks and all that,
I can only imagine the pressure to be perfect, especially as an Olympian.
right? But she doesn't let that define her. She said those setbacks actually made her stronger, both as an athlete and a person. They've taught her about perseverance, adaptability, mental toughness, all that.
That never give up attitude, right?
Exactly.
That's what sets people apart.
It does. But success isn't always a straight line, is it?
Definitely not. There are definitely some bumps in the road, even for the best of us.
Right. Case actually talks about this with Richard Branson.
Richard Branson. Oh, the Virgin Group founder.
Yeah. Known for his bold ventures
Mhm.
and, well, his willingness to fail spectacularly sometimes.
Like Virgin Cola, right?
That's the one.
His attempt to, compete with Coke.
And Virgin Cars, too, that online car selling thing. Total flops. But Branson didn't let those failures define him. He learned, he adapted, and he just moved on to the next thing.
It's that entrepreneurial spirit, trying new things, even if it means you might fall flat sometimes.
Exactly. But what about when failure feels really huge? Like when you've lost it all and have to start over completely from scratch.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, Kay shares this amazing story of Salva Dut, one of the lost boys of Sudan.
Oh, I've heard of that.
He fled his village during the Civil War, walked for hundreds of miles, spent years in refugee camps, and then eventually made it to the U.S.
That's an incredible journey.
It is. So how does this relate to make failure matter?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Salva could have given up, faced with that much loss and hardship. But he used those experiences to fuel his mission to help others.
Oh.
He started this nonprofit, Water for South Sudan, and they've drilled hundreds of wells.
Really?
Yeah, brought clean water to thousands of people in his home country.
He turned his pain into purpose. That's inspiring.
It is. Okay, next we have a story any sports fan will love. It's about the Washington Capitals
Oh, yeah, the Caps. I know them.
and their journey to finally win the Stanley Cup. Their captain, Alex Ovechkin, he was considered one of the greatest hockey players ever, but he just couldn't win the big one.
Right.
He faced years of criticism, setbacks, you name it, near misses.
But he never gave up.
Nope. And then in 2018, after 14 seasons, they finally did it. Won it all. The celebrations were wild.
They were. It's amazing how perseverance pays off. He kept learning from those past mistakes, and then, boom, victory.
Right. Ovechkin actually said, "It is much, much sweeter to go through all the pain and suffering to get to the top of the mountain. That's the way life is. That's the way great businesses get built."
Yeah. There's definitely something to be said for that delayed gratification.
There is. Sometimes those things we work hardest for, those are the ones that mean the most.
It's true. Okay, we've talked about entrepreneurs, athletes, refugees, but what about people who achieve success, later in life?
Right. Case calls them late bloomers.
I like that term better than failures, for sure.
Definitely. Case says we often underestimate those who don't fit the mold of early success.
It's true.
She talks about Milton S. Hershey, the chocolate guy.
I know the chocolate, but I don't really know the story behind it.
Well, his story is all about perseverance. He grew up in poverty, had almost no formal education, launched several businesses that totally flopped,
Wow.
but he never gave up on his dream. Eventually, he built the Lancaster Caramel Company, sold it for a ton of money, and then used that to start the Hershey Chocolate Company.
So from caramel to chocolate, he finally found his sweet spot.
He did. And his story really shows that success can happen at any age. It is. The book actually quotes Malcolm Gladwell, who said, "On the road to great achievement, the late bloomer will resemble a failure."
Wow.
It reminds us to be patient, keep learning and never give up.
But how do we deal with that fear of failure, It's easy to say it's an opportunity, but it's different when you're in the middle of it.
It is. Case's advice is to be open about our failures.
Really?
Yeah, share our stories, talk about what we learned and connect with others through that.
So vulnerability is key.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
takes away that fear, creates space for, authenticity and connection.
Right.
And it can be really powerful both for us and for those who hear our stories. The book also talks about reframing rejection as a badge of honor, actually.
Badge of honor. How does that work?
Well, think about it. Rejection often means you're pushing boundaries, trying new things,
Right.
not settling for the status quo.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's not a weakness, it's a sign that you're on the right track.
Okay, so you're challenging yourself.
Right. And Case reminds us that even the most successful people, they faced tons of rejection. Like J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author. She was rejected by 12 publishers before finding one.
Wow.
Imagine if she had quit.
Harry Potter wouldn't exist. Okay, but let's be honest. Sometimes failures is more than just a learning opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
What about when there are big consequences?
Right.
When the stakes are really high?
Well, the book looks at this through the Gates Foundation's efforts to wipe out polio.
Oh, right, polio.
It's been a really difficult and complex endeavor,
I bet.
with setbacks and obstacles along the way.
But they've made progress, haven't they?
Oh yeah, polio cases have gone down dramatically worldwide. But there have been times when they've fallen short,
Mm-hmm.
and they had to adjust, find new ways to move forward.
So even with all those resources and the best intentions, failure can still happen.
It can. That's why Make Failure Matter is so important. It's not about being perfect. It's about
Ah.
being resilient, learning from those mistakes, and just keep going.
Okay, I see what you mean. That's a powerful message. But let's shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about, individual action. But what about working together? How do we get out of our own little bubbles and collaborate to reach bigger goals?
That brings us to reach beyond your bubble, which is one of the most, I think, crucial principles for really creating change that lasts.
Reach beyond your bubble. Okay. What does that actually mean, though?
It's about recognizing that we all have blind spots, right?
Mhm.
We tend to surround ourselves with people who are like us, who share our views, and kind of just reinforce what we already believe.
Okay, so we need more diverse perspectives.
Exactly. And Case offers some pretty compelling examples of how to do this. She and her husband, Steve Case, the AOL co-founder,
Right.
they take this annual RV trip across America.
Wait, the billionaire tech guy driving an RV? That's not the image I have.
I know, right? Yeah. But it's a great example of them actively seeking out different perspectives. They call their initiative Rise of the Rest. And they invest in startups, meet with entrepreneurs in places that, most venture capitalists ignore.
So they're bridging the gap between Silicon Valley and the rest of the country.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And they found so much talent and innovation in these places. It challenges the whole idea that big ideas can only come from certain areas or certain people.
That's awesome. So literally getting out of your bubble geographically can lead to new things.
It can. But then there are those metaphorical bubbles we all have, right?
Oh, yeah.
The ones that filter how we see things.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Case argues that we need to challenge those biases, seek out diverse perspectives, whether it's through travel or reading or just talking to people who are different from us.
So broaden our horizons, both intellectually and socially.
Yeah. And she really stresses building what she calls unlikely partnerships to achieve greater impact.
Unlikely partnerships. I like that.
Right. The book highlights some really inspiring examples of this. Let's start with impact investing, which is this growing movement that's, blurring the lines between profit and purpose.
Impact investing. Okay. So investments that make money, A and D, do good in the world.
Exactly. It's using your money to create positive change. And there's so many companies doing this now, creating both financial and social returns.
Like Warby Parker, the eyeglass company, they donate a pair of glasses for every pair they sell.
That's right. And Happy Family, that organic baby food company we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah, them. They care about profits and the planet.
And then there's Grayston Bakery. They make the brownies for Ben& Jerry's.
No way.
Yeah. They have this open hiring policy. They give jobs to people who might otherwise struggle to find work, like people who are incarcerated or homeless.
It's like they're using their business to create social change.
They are. And impact investing is just one example of those unlikely partnerships. The book also talks about collaborations tackling global health challenges.
Okay, let's hear it.
One of the most powerful stories is about developing a new hazmat suit for Ebola.
Ebola. That's a scary disease.
It is. And the healthcare workers treating Ebola patients, they face huge risks.
Right.
The old hazmat suits were clunky, hard to take off, and actually made exposure more likely.
Yikes.
So how did they make it better?
Yeah, how did they fix that?
A team from Johns Hopkins, led by a nurse named Jill Crane, partnered with this global health nonprofit called JPIEGO.
Okay.
They actually worked directly with healthcare workers to understand their needs and what was hard about the old suits.
So they were getting input from the people who actually use them.
Exactly. And using that, they designed a suit that was much safer and more effective.
So you've got healthcare folks, engineers, designers, all working together to create a breakthrough that could actually save lives.
Exactly. And their suit was even featured at New York Fashion Week.
Wait, an Ebola hazmat suit on a runway?
Yes. It was this partnership between JPIEGO, the International Rescue Committee, and the GE Foundation to raise awareness about global health innovation.
That's amazing. Talk about an unlikely pairing. Okay, but we need to talk about something important here. We're all about reaching beyond our bubbles. But what about when those differences are huge? Like when people disagree on basic values, can we really be better together then?
That's a crucial question. And Case answers it with the story of PEPFAR. That's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief.
PEPFAR, okay. That's a huge global health program, right?
It is. And it was started in 2003 by President George W. Bush.
Oh, wow. That's interesting, given his, conservative views.
Right. It's a really remarkable example of building those unlikely partnerships.
So how did he actually get that program going?
He brought together people from all over the political spectrum, like religious conservatives, AIDS activists, even people from the drug companies.
That sounds like a recipe for, disaster.
It could have been, but they all agreed that something had to be done. Millions were dying, and they knew they had to work together.
So common ground, even with those big disagreements.
Right. They focused on saving lives and were able to put their differences aside to create a program that has really changed the fight against AIDS.
That's amazing. It shows that collaboration can work, even when it seems impossible.
It can. And it's not always about, global pandemics. Sometimes it's about recognizing those different personalities and working styles within our own teams,
Yeah, for sure.
The book actually talks about this. Case shares a story about taking a personality test with her team at AOL.
Okay, I'm always up for a good personality test. What kind of test was it?
It was pretty simple. You just categorize people as thinkers or feelers. And guess what?
What?
Case was the only feeler on the whole team.
So she was surrounded by thinkers. That's got to be tough.
It was. At first, she felt pretty alone. But then, the consultant running the exercise said that the best teams actually have both types. You need data people and D people who understand how decisions affect others.
That makes sense. You need both sides to make good decisions.
Exactly. And that exercise really changed how Case and her team worked. They learned to appreciate each other's strengths, use those differences to get better results.
It's like those differences can actually be our biggest strength.
They can.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered getting out of our geographical bubbles, challenging biases, building diverse teams. But how do we actually do all this in our daily lives?
Right. Good question.
Well, Case offers some advice in the last chapter called Now Go Get Outside Your Bubble every day. She says to start by figuring out what our own blind spots are.
Okay, but how do we do that? They're called blind spots for a reason.
True. But we can become more aware of them.
Okay.
Kay says to ask ourselves some hard questions. Who do we spend our time with? Where do we get our information? What do we assume about people different from us?
So become aware of those filters.
Exactly. And
Oh.
once we've done that, we can start to challenge those blind spots, actively seek out other perspectives, listen to voices we normally don't hear, engage in conversations that might make us uncomfortable.
Okay, but that sounds kind of hard. Where do you even begin?
Kay says start small.
Oh.
It could be reading a book by someone with a totally different background, going to an event outside your usual circle.
Little things like that.
Exactly. Following someone on social media who has different views. And then as those little steps get easier, you can take bigger leaps.
Okay, that makes sense. Baby steps.
Right. It's about being curious, open, and willing to explore new things.
It's about choosing to be fearless every day.
Right. Now, speaking of stepping outside our comfort zones, remember that story about the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, yeah, those cherry blossoms. How did those get there again?
Well, it all started with Eliza Sidmore. She was a school teacher who fell in love with cherry blossoms during her travels to Japan.
Okay.
And she was just determined to bring that beauty to Washington, D.C. Spent decades, actually, trying to make it happen.
Wait, so those iconic cherry blossoms, that's all thanks to one woman?
Yep, 24 years of roadblocks, but she never gave up.
Wow. Talk about persistence, right? It really shows what can happen when you're passionate about something. But honestly, it's tough to keep up that energy all the time, especially when, self-doubt creeps in or a problem just feels too big.
That's where let urgency conquer fear comes in.
Okay.
It's about connecting to that deep sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Like knowing that what you're doing is so important, it pushes you past those obstacles.
Yeah, it's like, this matters so much, I have to do something.
Exactly. Case talks about Marian Wright Edelman, the founder of the Children's Defense Fund.
Right, I know her.
She's dedicated her life to fighting for kids' rights,
Yeah.
driven by this belief that if we don't stand up for children, then we don't stand for much.
Wow, you can really feel that urgency in her work. It's like, it makes you want to get involved too.
That's what a be fearless mindset can do, I think. It's not about being reckless. It's about knowing that sometimes the most important things require us to push past our comfort zones.
To embrace the unknown, right?
Right, so to wrap up this deep dive into be fearless, what's one big thing you hope our listeners take away from all this?
Good question.
I think it's that anyone can live a life full of purpose. It's about finding what truly matters to you and then being brave enough to act, even when it's tough. Kay says, if not you, then who? If not now, then when?
Powerful words. So to our listeners, think about those questions. Embrace the Be Fearless principles we've talked about. You really can make a difference starting today.
Share your journey with us. Let's create some positive change together.
And as always, keep diving deep.